Come unwrap some holiday magic this season in Denver, where the lights are brighter and the shopping is grander, where the season feels a whole lot more wonderful. Discover great hotels and more things to do at milehighholidays.com.
Amid the fabled hills of Judea in Southwest Asia stands Jerusalem, the capital of Palestine, sacred to three of the world's great religions.
My name is Richard Dix, and this is How Did That Happen? A podcast where I look at everyday things or events and try to figure out how they came to be. Every week I will research one topic, and by the end of the episode, I hope to truly have the answer to the question, how did that happen? All right, welcome back to another episode of How Did That Happen? I am your host, Richard Dix. This is episode number 81. If this is your first time tuning in, I appreciate it. Thank you for pressing play and giving us a listen over here. If this is not your first time, welcome back. And thank you for pressing play again. We always like to find out how things happen over here. Been going strong for almost 2 years now. We have our 2-year anniversary coming up in a couple months. We have, the topics have ranged from many different things. From knights and bowling balls to transatlantic slave trade and pirates and Amish people, and we just if there's something to talk about and find out about how it could happen, that's really what this podcast is here for. So when I saw what was happening over in Israel in Gaza with the Israel Hamas conflict, I thought this is we should dig into how this happened. We should try to find out what the real story is behind it, because you watch any different kind of type of news agency or any newspaper or listen to anybody on any social media, they all have their own angle. They all have their own idea of what it is, and it's hard to get a good understanding. And so that's, I think, to me, I can hopefully try to bring some of that to some people. And what I will say is truly off the bat, I'm not trying to offend anybody, and I truly am trying to come from this from an unbiased, middle of the road approach, because I don't know enough to have such a strong feeling on either side. I will say I have opinions. I definitely have opinions, and I've watched some things unfold and happen that I give me pause in certain situations. But the point is, that's why I thought we should even do this episode. Is because we should find out how this happened. You can't just sit back and encapsulate something in 30 years of conflict and say, well, this is why they're doing that. That's it. Because it goes back, and it goes far back. And what we'll find, what I tried to do in this episode, in this pod, is we go back about 600 years and go forward from there and try to figure out just what happened with the land over that time and how it led to the conflicts that are currently unfolding right now. I do think it's important because, or it's important to this podcast because it actually falls, the things that are most pertinent to, I think, what actually happened during that time actually fall into the 40s to 70s time period that we're covering right now. When I saw that, I was like, wow, this is literally exactly what we're doing right now, because we I don't know if we're going to get to it in this episode, because I will say, and this may be this will be I think the first 2-part episodes, the first 2-parter HDTH, because there's just so much, and I'm not trying to leave anything out. I don't want people to be like, oh, well, you mentioned this, but you didn't mention that. It's like, man, when you run it back and you really look into all this different stuff, there's just so many different rocks to pick up and look under. So we're probably, because I say this not because I'm finishing up the rest of the first episode. We're gonna get to about the 30s and the 40s, but then we're going to cover the 50s and the 60s as well. Of this conflict, which also has so much to do with what's going on right now. But of course, this is the beginning of the episode, so we have the housekeeping here. What am I watching? I'll tell you. I'll be honest, man. I've watched a little bit of that Golden Bachelor. I've been watching a little bit of that old guy, trying to rekindle some love. I don't love it. I'm not super engaged to it, but I do find it interesting that they switched it up, and they have these older women out here acting a fool, just acting wild. And so, yeah, on a Thursday night at 8:00, you might find me in front of the TV doing that. I don't know, maybe. But let's see, what am I listening to? I've actually gone back. I'm back on the audiobook tip. I just opened up this audiobook, and I'm listening to a couple chapters of it. It's called 9 Black Robes by a woman with a last name that I cannot pronounce. Discopit something. You know what I mean? It's, yeah. But it's about It is about how over the last 50 years, the Republican Party has made it their effort to stack the bench of the Supreme Court and have it be a conservative court. And she just kind of goes over the things that went into place to make that happen. It's very interesting. She's not pointing fingers. She's really just saying this is because it's true. You can do the numbers are there. The numbers are there. But pretty good book, very good book. I'll let you know when I finish it. See if it's still a good book. But yeah, that's what I'm listening to, what I'm watching. As always, check out the Bite Size Bios every other Monday. These come out, and right now they of course are going with the 40s to 70s series that we're doing. The last one that came out was J. Edgar Hoover, John Edgar Hoover. We talked about him. We talked about all the different things that he had going on. He had a lot. If you listen, he was what we probably agree to be a closeted homosexual who had a lot of issues with his own self and projected that onto other people, and kept files on everybody from Eleanor Roosevelt to MLK. And I hope you guys went and checked out that works cited that I was talking about. It's still up there on the website, which shows you where MLK went to go visit that mistress, and the FBI called the fire department on him, and he came out and got in his car, and you can see it. It's just, I don't know, it's a little bit of history that I think is worth checking out. But yeah, so that's the Bite Size Bios series, which is always, it's the accompaniment to the HTTH episode. We talk about what happened on the previous episode, the previous HTTH, while also covering somebody from history. And of course, give us 5 stars wherever you find this. If you're feel so inclined, 2 stars if you didn't want to. Tell us why you didn't like it. If you give us 2 stars, because constructive criticism is always welcome. I don't think there's much else to say about the app. Trying to get the social media out there. We are on TikTok now, guys. I don't know what that's gonna mean, but that's a true statement. The podcast is on TikTok. We got the Instagram. Everything is at HTTHappen. The TikTok is actually at HTTHappen22. Was 2022 being the year that this podcast jumped off. But yeah, give it a check. Check it out. HTTHappen.com for all the extras. Of course, you'll find the works cited, like I'm mentioning there. I'm trying to make more extensive. You guys can really go see and find the videos that I'm seeing up there. I really think it's helpful, because that's where I'm pulling some of the information from. So definitely go check it out. It's with every episode has its own like post page with a title card, and there's all the notes that I go off of while I'm doing the podcast, and then of course there's all the works cited from where I got all the information. So I think it's worth it if you listen to the podcast and you kind of want to know where did I get it from. It's not just from out of thin air, It's not just from some random idea that I have. It's literally from people who might have a general idea of what's going on. But yeah, I don't think there's much else to get into before we really jump into it. I do want to say, I know that this can be sensitive content for people, so I do want to say I'm approaching it what I feel is the appropriate protocol. And once again, I don't want to offend anybody. Just want to try to just get to the bottom of how this happened. That's why we're here, right? So without further ado, as we're going to do, here is the episode.
Throughout all the sorrowful centuries since the Hebrews were scattered over the face of the earth, their religious rituals have kept ever before them the memory of Palestine as the land promised them by Moses.
All right, so we are going to talk about what is probably considered to be a very sensitive subject to certain people. But once I saw this stuff happening, I thought I don't understand what's going on. And by that, I mean, of course, the Israel and Hamas conflict that's happening over in I guess you could say Israel, Palestine, depending on how you feel. But when I saw that stuff, I said, okay, first off, like I said, I don't know what's going on, right? Which makes it hard to watch and comprehend in any capacity what you're seeing, because it's just without the context, it makes almost no sense at all. But I felt, and then I realized once I was watching this and I didn't know what was going on, I realized this is almost the perfect time, not perfect, because you don't want to say perfect for people. When people die, it's not perfect, but this is an opportune time, if you will, for me to make maybe a small pivot with the podcast. It would still answer the same question that we ask day in and day out in this podcast: is how did that happen, right? And so I sat back and I thought, okay, can I figure out how this happened, how we got here, how we got to the Palestinian paragliders, paragliding into that music festival on October the 7th. How do we get here? And if I could maybe shed a little light and color in some dark areas and shine some light in some dark areas that maybe haven't been touched on, throughout this. This is going to be a long slog. If you're tuning in, get comfortable, because what I'm going to do, if you know this podcast, the way we do, we go back before we go forward. We're not just going to hop into what happened this past week, or even what happened in the last few years. We're gonna go back hundreds, if not close to thousands of years, and we're gonna talk about, and we're gonna work forward, which is the way that I was able to understand it. It's the only way that I could bring anything to you and feel like I have even a modicum of understanding in this realm. Because I've written a blog post which I think sums up the way I feel about it almost perfectly. We can use that in that instance. Is that, you know, this is everything we're hearing here is through the eyes of an uninformed American Christian. You know, and I say uninformed because I've done the research, but I'm not nearly as well informed as anybody who's been living this for their entire life, or for anybody that's even set foot on that ground. You know, I mean, my father, you know, he has, so I'd listen to what he says, you know, more than the average person who's, you know, not everybody's been to Israel, and not everybody's been to Jerusalem. And like I said, I haven't. So I definitely I can consider myself still to be uninformed and still really not know what's going on. I say all that to say we're going to dig into it. And I really would hope that you understand what I'm going into. I'm going into with a open-minded and just objective way of viewing things. Like I said, I'm not Jewish. I'm not Muslim. So I don't have a dog in the race, if you will. I'm just somebody who's watching from thousands of miles away and trying to understand what's going on. That's where this is coming from. That's the angle that we're coming from. So what we're going to do is we're going to start, for me, now you could go back even further than where I'm going to start, and maybe I'll do a little, you know, just a little mention of where, if you feel that I haven't gone far enough backwards and you want to touch on some things, this may be where you want to start. So really, we're going to start in the Ottoman Empire, but before the Ottoman Empire, there was the Byzantine Empire, and then there was the Seljuk Empire. And these are, the Seljuk Empire goes back to about 1,000 years ago. Started in the year 1037, and that covers a lot of the areas that we're talking about right now, almost quite literally the entire Middle East, with the exception of, I believe it's Egypt, maybe, and some other places were not part of the Seljuk Empire 1,000 years ago. So that's what we're going to talk about. You know, because what we're getting into, what we find, and what I think, and once again, this is just the uninformed eyes of an American Christian, and this entire disagreement, this entire argument is about who owns the land, who lays claim to the land, and who has the ability to create a sovereign nation on said land. And it always, you know, I feel like with the way they've thought about it is always, you know, it just either goes back or goes forward. Either we were here first or we're here now. Either way, it's the fact, you know, it's some sort of possession. But I want to take it back to the Seljuk Empire just to point out that at one point, it was all the Seljuks. That's who owned it. It wasn't even, you know, Palestine or Israel or any of those good guys. It was a high medieval empire that was mostly Turco-Persian. It encompassed about 3.9 square kilometers, founded by two brothers who ruled over its territory. And that's just a quick, we're not going to get into it, but I just wanted to go back. Like I said, if you feel like, because I'm going to hop into the Ottoman Empire, but I want people to be like, oh, but you know, there was stuff, you know about the Seljuk? Yes, I know about the Seljuks, but I just did not think it was necessary to go that far back in order to go forward. So I wanted to mention that just for all the, you know, the real history guys out there. If you're listening, I got you. I see you. All right. So yeah, we're going to hop into the Ottoman Empire, which the Ottoman Empire would end up being one of the, I guess, the Ottoman Empire comes about 400 years after the Seljuks. A lot of stuff happens, a lot of battles. The Seljuk Empire ends up going down, broken into some small pieces, and that's what these little nation states one of these nation states would then become the beginning of the Ottoman Empire. So we're going to jump right into that now. The Ottoman Empire is named after a man named Osman I, Osman Ghazi, right? And so this is interesting, just to hop off right here, is that I've always wondered, I think I even mentioned it in one of these podcasts right here, where they got the name Ottoman Empire. Like, were they really about Ottomans? Were they really about like places to set your feet up if you're sitting on a couch? I don't think they were, right? But so where do they get the name from? So the guy's name is Osman, right? Osman I. But when you pronounce it in Arabic, it sounds like Ottoman. It's Uthman, Ottoman, right? And that's where you get Ottoman. I mean, it blew my mind. We're talking day one when I did this research. When I started this, I was like, okay, I'm in. You got me, because I've always wanted to know that, and you just gave me that little bit. The Ottoman Empire was created by a man named Osman I, and so he was from the House of Osman, and so that's kind of where we get it from. He was like, the Osmans were one of the small little villages. They weren't that small, but they were a village that was broken up once the Seljuks had kind of broken up. The Byzantine Empire kind of taken over and was kind of taken over to the west. But the Osmans and a couple other guys' names, I don't have all the names of all the different villages, basically because they took them over. They didn't really matter that much as far as at that time. But these guys would be the beginning. The Osman name, in turn, was the Turkish form of the Arabic Uthman, like we said, Turkish word for Ottoman. Originally referred to the tribal followers of Osman in the 14th century. That's when they finally got the name Ottoman. But what we're really talking about when they really kind of become to this point was kind of around the 12th, right around the 1300s. The word subsequently came to be used to refer to the empire's military and administrative elite. In contrast, the term Turk was used to refer to the Anatolian peasant and tribal population and was seen as a disparaging term when applied to urban, educated individuals. And so these guys would rule for a long time, quite literally into the 20th century, which you have to tip your hat to that. It's one of the things. There's not many things that carried over into the 20th century from like almost the almost the medieval times. Like there's not many things, and this is one of them. And what kind of solidified their empire was the conquering of Constantinople. This was done by the son of Murad II, Mehmed the Conqueror. He reorganized both the state and military, and on the 29th of May, 1453, he conquered Constantinople from the Byzantine Empire, which basically kind of made them fall, if I can understand it. Like, I don't know this old geographical history stuff as well as I'd like to. Oh, well, that's a lie. I don't really want to know it that much. It's really boring, guys. I've sat through hours. I kid you not, hours of just watching maps move while some British guy just tells you what happened 1,000 years ago. Oh my gosh, it is mind melting. But I mean, it's worth it. It's worth it to kind of watch and see. That was the point for me, was to go back, because you can go back 200 or 300 years and you can talk about, okay, who had what land when? Okay, but who had what land when 500-700 years ago? And maybe let's start there. And I don't know, not that I feel like it maybe means more, but it's just, let's maybe go back as far as we can. So Mehmed allowed the Eastern Orthodox Church to maintain its autonomy and land in exchange for accepting Ottoman authority. Sultan Selim I, these are about the 1500s. He dramatically expanded the empire's eastern and southern frontiers by defeating Shah Ismail of Safavid, Iran, in the Battle of Chaldiran. These names are, I'm having just as much trouble as I do with all the others. This is where they expand. Like I said, really what I think what makes the Ottoman Empire, or what is the anchor of the Ottoman Empire, is of course Constantinople, which of course we know to become Istanbul. It's just a town, a very, very ancient town. And there's a very good song, Istanbul is Constantinople, all that good stuff. But then we get to the fall of the empire. Right, because that's where you're wondering how we loop back in to the conflict that we're talking about. The reason I told you about Osman and Uthman and all that good stuff is because at this time, Palestine is a region of the Ottoman Empire. That's why this is important. I may have buried the lead. Maybe I didn't bring that forward, but we're here now. Okay, so Palestine is a part of the Ottoman Empire, and the Ottoman Empire is going to start to fall and deteriorate right around the 19th century. It's just going to fall victim to all the modern issues of an empire, and the fact that I don't really think that anyone can own any vast amount of land. Like, once you get to the large, like, the British Empire eventually fell down. The Roman Empire eventually fell down. All these empires before, like I told you, the Seljuk Empire, which was huge. The Byzantine Empire was not as big, I don't think. But the Ottoman Empire, just ginormous. And I mean, we'll cover just real fast, since we're talking about it. Let's see. Countries who were in the Ottoman Empire. Like, you'll see, it's a lot. Like countries that at one point been a part of the Ottoman Empire. We're talking Turkey, Greece, Bulgaria, Egypt, Hungary, Macedonia, Romania, Jordan. I mean, the list goes on. Lebanon, Palestine. Syria, just like this place, the Ottoman Empire was so big, and truthfully, what happened was they got too big for their britches. The same thing that happened when we're talking about the Roman Empire. If you look at how much land the Roman Empire had, it's not rocket science that would eventually fall down. I don't think, like I said, no matter how, even now, I don't think you could have an empire that spreads as far, because people talk. People are always unhappy. People are always dissatisfied with the authority, and when you're 4,000 miles away, it makes it a lot easier to grow the seeds of that dissatisfaction, and turn it into something, an uprising, if you will. But I'm getting off this is not actually how the Ottoman Empire. I'm just out here just talking at this point. Let's get back to it. So, the fall of the Ottoman Empire. Despite efforts to improve education in the 1800s, the empire lagged far behind its European competitors in literacy. So by 1914, it is estimated that only 5 to 10% of people in the Ottoman Empire could actually read. They said that. I saw that in a documentary. They even said it was even less than that. I think they really did. They said about 2% is what I saw in a documentary that was talking about this. They had a shortage of well-trained military officers, engineers, clerks, doctors, all the stuff you need to kind of make a society run. They didn't have that because, 90 to 95% of their inhabitants could not read. And so during the Tanzimat period, the government's series of constitutional reforms led to a fairly modern conscripted army, banking system reforms, and the decriminalization of homosexuality, which I thought was a interesting one to throw in there. Pretty cool. You think about it, we're talking 1839. 1839. I'm not sure if that's when they exactly did it, but the Tanzimat period was from 1839 to 1876. So somewhere in there, they were like, we're cool with homosexuals, which is just literally centuries before it would happen in other places. But so the real issue, besides the size for the Ottoman Empire, would end up being the Young Turks, right? The Young Turks Revolution. So the Young Turks were a political reform movement in the early 20th century that favored the replacement of the Ottoman Empire's absolute monarchy with a constitutional government. They led a rebellion against the absolute rule of Sultan Abdul Hamid II in the 1908 Young Turk Revolution. And that, of course, was a constitutionalist revolution in the Ottoman Empire. The Committee of Union and Progress, which was an organization of the Young Turks movement, forced Sultan Abdul Hamid II to restore the Ottoman constitution and recall the parliament, which ushered in multi-party politics within the empire. So this is really when, they're getting rid of the kings and queens, if you will. That's the only way I can kind of relate it. We're talking sultans, of course, but they're pushing them out in favor of the actual sort of constitution is what they want. And this is right around the turn of the century. This is in 1908 is when this is happening. And the CUP is really interesting because they do some really, really messed up stuff. The CUP ended up being successful in turning their monarchy into an actual constitutional monarchy, and they would end up being that way all the way up until they ended the actual empire. And so this brings us into World War I. The Ottoman Empire would fight on the side of the Central Powers, of course, against the Allied powers, and that would really lead to their demise. They would end up losing, of course, the Central Powers would lose World War I. And this is actually also, I mentioned this, I think, in the blog post that I mentioned earlier. This is the same war that led to Hitler becoming Hitler, basically. Is the way all the losers of World War I were basically just dogged out in such a way that, I don't know, it really reverberated for the next 100 years. That's what we're going to kind of get into as we get further into the history of the Israel-Hamas conflict, is that a lot of it literally stems from what would happen over these next 10 to 15 years. We're talking about the 1910s on into the 1920s. How we end World War I is really going to spell out.
When you download the Baker's app, you have easy access to savings every day. Get the most out of weekly sales and receive personalized coupons to save on your favorite items, all while earning 1 fuel point for every $1 spent. Baker's makes it easy to save while you shop, whether it's in-store or online, so you get the most value out of every trip, every time. Download the Baker's app now to save big on your next purchase. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Must have a digital account to redeem offers. Restrictions may apply. See site for details.
With the Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
This is your captain speaking. We've got clear runway and the weather's fine, but we're just going to circle up here a while and get lucky. No, nothing like that. It's just these cash prizes add up quick. So I suggest you sit back, keep your tray table upright, and start getting lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
How we ended up how we really got to where we are now. I don't want to jump the gun because I do want to cover a couple of things. I do want to talk about. Let's see, before we get too deep into World War I, there's just a couple of massacres. I know it just sounds horrific, but I just wanted to talk about this stuff with the Ottoman Empire because I thought it was interesting because what we find, I've never understood what the Armenian genocide was. I've never understood why it happened. I just knew that I literally learned about it from Kim Kardashian. I wish that wasn't true. I mean, not that it's just like you think you would get it from a book or a website. I got it from Kim Kardashian, and I looked it up, and she was right. But I didn't really understand. I didn't look too deep into it. But really, the CUP, like I was saying, that party, they committed these atrocities against the Armenians. They killed at least what looks to be almost like 1.5 million Armenians over a few years. There were, I think, at least 3 Armenian massacres that started in the late 1900s and went on into the 20th century. And this was really done to move the people from the land that they were occupying. You know, they were living in a place which I do believe, and I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Definitely any people who find fault or issues with my, what I'm saying here, let me know. But they were in a place that would end up being modern day Turkey, and the Ottoman Empire was trying to kind of create, and in my opinion, from the maps that I watched and from what I heard, it seems like the Ottomans knew that the end was near, and around that time they were trying to make space for what I would consider them to think the real Turks. And truthfully, what I really didn't understand also as well, that the Armenians were Christians, and that makes so much more sense when you actually look at it and think about it, because it's more of a religious thing than anything. So they were removing these Armenian Christians to replace them with Ottoman Muslims. But it's just wild that they would end up being murdered like that. And then that would actually also bring us to a similar connection, what we call the occupation of the Ottoman Bank. And this is something that I found literally while I was doing the research for this podcast, along with the Armenian genocide, because it goes hand in hand with it. What the Armenian genocide was, what happens is these guys overtake the Ottoman Bank, right? Which at the time, because the Ottoman Empire is so large, is one of the largest banks in the world, right? So their idea is, we take over the Ottoman Bank, we can spread awareness about the fact that they're murdering hundreds of thousands of us all the time here. Armenian people specifically, so, these Armenian guys. And yeah, so I'll just kind of read here what I have. It says, in an effort to raise further awareness and action by the major European powers, 28 armed men and women, led primarily by Papkin Suyuni and Armin Gero, took over the bank, which largely employed European personnel from Great Britain and France. So they thought, oh, this will like really make people, look up. Look, we're taking, all these people. We're coming in and we're taking over this building with all these, Great Britain and French citizens. Stirred largely due to the inaction of the European powers in regard to the Hamidian massacre started by Sultan Abdulhamid II, the Armenian Revolutionary Federation members saw its seizure as a means to bring full attention to their plight. At the time, the Ottoman Bank served as an important financial center for both the empire and the countries of Europe. Retribution against the ordinary Armenian populace in Constantinople was swift and brutal. Ottomans loyal to the government began to massacre the Armenians in Constantinople itself. And what's really interesting about this is what happened really is once the Ottomans, because basically, they ended up taking these guys. They didn't, nothing really happened. I think those guys, let me get it right. But I think those guys, they died. Yeah, I looked and it looks, these guys, they lived for what it looks like. So I'm looking at a picture of what they say are the surviving members of the guys who did the raid, and it's at least like 15 dudes. So a lot of them made it. But what happened afterwards, like I said, is basically they killed thousands of Armenians in Constantinople just because of this. But what's really messed up and what's really, really, really diabolical is they, about 3 weeks after the raid, they go to the specific town that some of these guys are from, and they just start killing people, kids, wives, anybody, because they're from the town of these dudes who rose up against them. I had to put that in there because I wanted to, because I guess really because there's what we find when we look back at the history of all this, whether it's against violence against whatever different religions of any kind, there's just been violence beyond belief in this area. When you look at it, the killing of innocent people because of their religion and their and their race, it's, I don't know, it's just hard. But I guess my point is, it seems to have continued. I don't know. That's definitely not good. But I'm just saying I'm trying to give the background to show, I guess, and this sounds really cold, but that this is nothing new in that area. I don't know if it will ever stop. My father asked me the other day we were talking about it, and he said, how do you think it ends? I thought about it for a moment, and I gave him what I thought was my most truthful answer. I hadn't really thought about it. No one had actually asked me that in the time since it started, which has been about a week. When I'm recording it now, I want to mention just for timestamp, it's been about a week and a half, about 8 days. Where are we at? This is October 16th. It's about 9 days since October 7th. But I hadn't really thought about it. And I think what I think is that, and I could be wrong, but I think Israel will be successful in whatever they do this time. But I think that inevitably in the next 20 to 30 years, it could be 40 years, I don't know, there's going to come back there, the Palestinians are going to manifest themselves in some other way that is going to be displeasing to the Israelis, and they're going to be fighting again. That was the answer I gave my father. And he said he thought that was probably true. But what do we know? Once again, we're just two uninformed Christian guys who live in Virginia. So, but getting off topic here. I wanted to mention those massacres. Like I said, I thought it was pertinent to the entire topic, but let's get back on the timeline here. We are back in World War I. See if we can slide down here. So the Ottoman Empire, they're part of the Central Powers. They lose to the Allied powers. And what happens is all those Allied powers, all those European guys, all those countries, they are fighting to gobble up what's left of the Ottoman Empire. And it's been said that they were already thinking about dividing this stuff up even before the war was even over. Where it really starts, where I think it really starts is with the Sykes-Picot Agreement, which was in 1916. And it was a secret treaty between the UK and France with assent from the Russian Empire and the Kingdom of Italy to define their mutually agreed spheres of influence and control over the Ottoman Empire. Basically, like they wanted to break up the Ottoman Empire. They didn't want to tell anybody about kind of what they were doing, but they already just knew, like, okay, when we beat them, France, you get this part, Russia, you get a little bit of this part, Britain, you get this part, and it was all because of all the resources that are in that land, all the ports that run along the Mediterranean, all that good stuff. The agreement was based on the premise that the Triple Entente, I think is how you pronounce it, would achieve success in defeating the Ottoman Empire during World War I. And it would only stand for a couple of years because, they would end up losing. Once the UN got a little more power, they wanted something, I guess, to be like specifically or officially on the books. But it wouldn't change that much. So, that's why, that's really, that's why I said that's where it starts. But what we would find, let's see, let's jump down here to the Armistice of Mudros. That was in 1918, and that basically, it was said to have ended the hostilities in the Middle East between the Ottoman Empire and the Allies of World War I. And I guess, you can break it down because I think the way it goes they signed multiple treaties over the next 5 years that basically do the same thing at different times, but I don't think it's specifically against all of the Allied powers. So this may be the first time where, okay, they're declaring, okay, we're not mad at all of you guys as a group anymore, but we're still mad at a couple of you guys. Looking at you, France. Looking at you, Britain. You know what I mean? So this is the Armistice of Mudros. It was signed by the Ottoman Minister of Marine Affairs, Rolf Bey, and British Admiral Somerset Arthur Gough Calthorpe on board the HSS Agamemnon in Mudros Harbor on the Greek island of Lemnos. The Ottoman army was demobilized, and all ports, railways, and other strategic points were made available for use by the Allies. And that was the big point, like I said, even with the Sykes-Picot Agreement, that what they really wanted, what it really was for a lot of these, they would end up getting to the mandate system, but it was just another way for these European countries to colonize the Middle East. They were just trying to get their money back, really, is what I've seen from the documentaries that I've watched, is France had invested so much money in the Middle East in the late 18th century leading up through the early 20th century that they kind of wanted a ROI. They wanted a return on their investment, so they really didn't want to. They didn't want to get out. They felt like they had some skin in the game. So these countries are still fighting for a territory that truthfully is not theirs. But you see that's the story across the globe. But yeah, so we got the Armistice of Mudros, and then we're gonna jump. And I'm kind of just hopping through because this stuff is very important. It's just we're not gonna sit here and talk about every battle that happened in between. And there's a lot of murder and a lot of things that have, or depending on what you call murder. War that happened, people died, But I kind of want to jump through the different ways that they're kind of slowly dividing up this. And so what happens is, from what I've seen, like I said before, I watched a lot of documentaries or a lot of maps, moving maps with British guys just talking about what happened. And it seems like, the Sykes-Picot Agreement, while not official, would end up being kind of still basically the way things would be laid out. And what they would try to do, let's see, next they do the Treaty of Sèvres, right? Sevres, and this was signed in the aftermath of World War One. It imposed harsher terms on the Ottoman Empire, but it was never actually ratified by the Ottoman Parliament in Istanbul. And this would actually just end up being thrown out 3 years later when they signed another treaty. That's what I mean. So it's like there's slowly becoming what it will become, and eventually it will become British mandated Palestine. Palestine will become under what I've never heard of before, but they call it a mandatory, is what it's what it's called. But it's supposed to be, basically it's just a modern day colony, from what people have been saying, because it basically allowed Britain to control the land and even veto laws, and kind of just be the final say, if you will, in how things are going to kind of operate and go down in that area. And this was they did this in large part to allow, I guess you could say, the resettling of Jewish people to come back into Palestine. And that was kind of the idea from the beginning.
Nevertheless, the Arabs are determined to keep Palestine an Arab country and to resist every move by Britain to admit more refugees. And their threats are backed up by the League of Arab States and by armed and trained men, ready to shatter the peace of the Near East by a religious war.
Because we're talking, the Treaty of Sèvres in 1920, but what was really the beginning, I guess, as far as the idea of Jewish people coming back to Palestine, was what's known as the Balfour Declaration, which happened in 1917. And that's, really when Britain was saying, even because, like I said, they always had this idea that they were going to have control of this land even before World War II was over. So they already kind of knew what was going to happen in their head, or what they wanted to happen. And they basically, was done by a man named Arthur Balfour, and he was saying that that Britain's cool with the idea of there being a Jewish state in Palestine. And so when you get the big nod like that from the big boys over there in Europe, it kind of gives you the go ahead to, start doing your resettling. And then you find out through all these different treaties and stuff that, your boy who said you can come back is now like running the country that he said he might give to you. Like, people just start showing up. It's kind of what happens.
After Lord Allenby conquered the Holy Land in 1917, the Jews were promised a national home in Palestine by Britain's Earl of Balfour, a policy endorsed by Woodrow Wilson and the League of Nations, which made Palestine a British mandate.
So, needless to say, the Turks and what was left of the Ottoman Empire, not cool with this, didn't like it one bit, and that's why there would be more fighting over the next few years, and that would lead them to come back and sign one more treaty, one more for the road, and that would be the Treaty of Lausanne. Lausanne, done in Switzerland. I want to say, hold on, let's go back first, just one moment for the Treaty of Sèvres. The Treaty of Sèvres, I do want to say, did I get it right? I think, was this one the one that was signed in a porcelain shop? I could be wrong. Hold on. Yeah, it was. It was. I just mentioned that because I always find it odd the places they choose to sign these treaties, on a ship somewhere, or like in some farmhouse, or and like this one is in like a room at a porcelain shop in where is it, in France, and the next one is at a building in Switzerland. That's the one that basically leaves it as it stands. There's like I said, there was fighting. The Turks, we ended up going through. I'm skipping through it, but there was a Turkish war for independence in between the 1920s and 1923, and that's kind of what really leads to the actual like Turkish nationalism, like where Turkey becomes its country. They have their now independence. They're no longer a part of the Ottoman Empire. They no longer have all the different colonies that they had when they were controlling the Ottoman Empire. They are just Turkey, not ham, not beef, but Turkey. And so the Treaty of Lausanne, it was what really just stopped everything. And they even had what I call, or not what I call, but what they call a declaration of amnesty from the times from 1914 to 1922 is also included in this treaty. An historian named Hans Lucas Kieser, he was quoted as saying that Lausanne tacitly endorsed the comprehensive policies of expulsion and extermination of hetero-ethnic and hetero-religious groups, end quote. And I read that, and I have to agree. I tend to agree. You know, we look at the genocides and the things that were done to people to literally kill them and or move them from wherever you didn't want them to be. That happened, and then they just for them to be like, you know what, those last 8 years, how about we just like we just all agree that whoa, you know, we got kicked up back there, right? Like, and they just like everything's okay now, and so that firmly puts us in like the 20s and the 30s now. We've covered as far as, I mean, if you want to go back and have just a quick recap of where we've been, we've talked about the Ottoman Empire, which controlled Palestine for 400 to 500 years, and then we watched the fall of that Ottoman Empire, and then we watched Britain come in and take control of it, and now it becomes British Mandate Palestine under the mandatory system that was instituted by the League of Nations that would then go on to become the United Nations. So that's I think it was really important to get through all of that to get up to this point of now we get to where the Jewish people are coming back to Palestine.
Repeatedly, the London spokesman for the Arab states has warned Britain's government that its policy is not acceptable to the Arabs.
Every Jew that arrives in Palestine is one more brick in the structure of the proposed Zionist state, one more unit towards the Zionist majority against the Arabs, so that it is impossible for the Arabs to regard the matter only in its humanitarian aspect. The political question was finally settled by the White Paper, and any attempt to force more refugees on Palestine now, on whatever grounds it is ostensibly made, would be a breach of that settlement.
And this might be a good place to go ahead and talk about Zionism, which I feel like is a large part, which I'd never really heard of until recently, but it is, I would say, the basis for why Israel thinks that it should have a nation. So in 70 CE, the Romans destroyed the Jewish temple in Jerusalem and exiled the Jews from their land. And that created what the Jewish diaspora, and Jews were just sent all across the world. Over the next 2,000 years, the people were scattered throughout the globe, and the whole time they were hoping to come back, to return to Jerusalem. Now, this idea of Zionism, I think a lot of people think it started with a man named Theodor Herzl, but it actually went way back before him. There's a thing called Proto-Zionism, which actually occurs, I think, about 100 years before he even is born. If I have my dates down, oh no, not before he was born, about 70 years before he was born. But it would all kind of start with the idea of the anti-Semitism that will be around Jews in Europe, and they would come to, I guess you don't want to say transform, but maybe the idea of the Jewish religion into a racial identity, and that was something that I've always been curious about, because it seems ambiguous to me as an outsider. I don't understand it, because Christians are not themselves their own race, but Jewish people are. And this comes, I think this is where we get a lot of that from, is during this time. Then the man Theodor Herzl, he writes a pamphlet in 1896 called Der Judenstaat, which is just the Jewish state. It's where he envisions the founding of a future independent Jewish state in the 20th century, and you could really argue that the idea of the state of Israel kind of rides on his back, and it would come to fruition. He actually even has his own holiday in Israel. There's a Herzl Day. I don't think I have the actual day of it, but he does have his own holiday. He wouldn't actually live to see Israel become its own state. He died in 1904 of like some heart problems, something like that. He was definitely the one of the main proponents to kind of drive the machine to create the Jewish state. And I think we're going to try to find a stopping point here, because I don't want to, like I said, there's so much information to cover, and I don't want this stuff to get lost in the end of a podcast, the stuff that I would then start to talk about now. I kind of wanted to go ahead and maybe give it its own episode. We're going to talk about the things that happened really from like, I want to say from really the World War II and forward. I would say what happens in Palestine, between Palestine and Israel, as more Israelis immigrate to the area, and the tensions tend to heighten up. What we find is this is where the real conflicts start, and where I would say there's been just constant retaliation, tit for tat, if you will, for over the next 70 years from these times that we're going to talk about, on the next episode. But I think we're going to go ahead and call it a day for this pod. Don't want to overload you guys, saturate you guys with too much information. I hope it was helpful. I hope you can guys go back, and there's definitely some stuff in there to listen to and go find. Talk about the Ottoman Empire, and I think it's really important that we talk about where it was before it was what it is now. All right, that was part 1 of the Israel-Hamas conflict episode. Hope you guys liked it. Hope I didn't ruffle too many feathers. Like I said, I realized about halfway through the pod in my head, I was like, there's just too much. And there have been previous episodes in the past where I was like, maybe there'll be a part 2, but I feel like this one, because we don't want to miss anything. We don't want to, jump to too many conclusions. We want the facts to be laid out and try to understand things as they actually exist. So because of that, there will be a part 2 coming out next week to finish it off. We're going to go ahead and talk about next week. We're going to talk about things that happened in 1947, 1948, when things really when the Jewish people kind of ended up getting, I would say, UN backing from what they were going to do, from what they were doing. It was basically laid out that they were going to get the land, and then they got the land and wanted to take more land. Ended up moving some Arabs. We'll get into all of that next week. But yeah, I hope you guys liked it. I don't know if this is the kind of stuff that people who listen to my podcast want to hear, but it's something that I thought was pertinent and worth checking out. So yeah, as always, give us 5 stars wherever you found this. I would really appreciate it. Helps the pod grow. Give us 2 stars if you didn't like it. Tell us why you didn't like it. Constructive criticism is always welcome. I don't think there's much else to say before we get out of here. Catch us on all the socials at HTTHappen, at HTTHappen22 on TikTok. HTTHappen.com is the website where you'll find all the extras, of course, all the videos. And this is one you want to go check out. The work cited for this will be very extensive. Very extensive. There's just so much stuff. And I found stuff from both sides. And that's what I think is really interesting. And you'll find, and that's why it's almost so hard to get a direct narrative of what happened, because you'll literally jump from one video that's made by a Jewish guy telling you what happened. Then you'll jump to another video made by a Muslim guy telling you what happened. They're talking about the exact same thing, but they come out almost like 50% different. So you really have to watch and take certain things with a grain of salt. But yeah, that's it for this week. I'll see you guys next week with the next bite-sized bios.
Judy was boring.
Hello.
Then Judy discovered ChumbaCasino.com.
It's my little escape.
Now Judy's the life of the party.
Oh, baby, mama's bringing home the bacon.
Whoa, take it easy, Judy. The Chumba life is for everybody. So go to ChumbaCasino.com and play over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Woodhouse Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram is bringing you more power, capability, and savings with the full lineup of new Ram trucks during the Black Friday sales event going on all month long. Lease a 2024 Ram 1500 Crew Cab Bighorn for $429 per month. Visit our 2 convenient metro locations in Blair or Bellevue or online anytime. Lease for 42 months, 10,000 miles per year with approved credit. Tax, title, license extra. $2,500 down plus first payment and $299 doc fee to its signing. Example stock number BC230242. Offer expires 11/30/2023. See dealer for details.